The rumble of a tired engine echoed through the dimly lit parking lot as Sarah Johnson eased her worn-out sedan into a vacant space outside Harper Enterprises. She checked the dashboard clock, 6:45 p.m., barely on time for her evening shift. Her heart pounded with a mix of relief and trepidation as she glanced over her shoulder into the back seat, where her 5-year-old daughter, Lily, sat strapped into her car seat. Her small hands gripped a well-loved stuffed bunny, its fur fraying at the edges, and her wide, curious eyes met hers with an innocence that always melted her heart. "Mommy, is this your work?" Lily asked, her voice soft but tinged with excitement. Sarah smiled wearily, brushing a strand of auburn hair from her face. "Yes, sweetheart. It's a big building where Mommy works to help people stay organized. Tonight, you get to be my special helper, okay?" Lily's face lit up, her enthusiasm momentarily quelling Sarah's guilt. She had never brought Lily to work before, it was strictly against company policy. But with her babysitter calling in sick at the last minute and no one else to rely on, she was out of options. Missing another shift could mean losing her job, and that wasn't a risk she could take. As a single mom, every paycheck mattered, especially with mounting bills and Lily's school fees. "I'll be good, I promise," Lily declared, clutching her bunny tightly. "I know you will, baby," Sarah said, leaning over to kiss her forehead. "Just stay close to Mommy, okay? This is a very important place, and we need to be extra careful." Lily nodded solemnly, her small hand wrapping around Sarah's as they stepped out of the car. The cool evening breeze tugged at Sarah's thin coat as they walked toward the gleaming glass doors of Harper Enterprises. The building towered over them, its sleek, modern design reflecting the lights of the city. To Sarah, it represented more than just a workplace, it was her lifeline, the only thing keeping her afloat in a sea of challenges. Inside, the lobby was nearly empty, the usual hustle and bustle of the day replaced by a quiet stillness. Sarah's heels clicked against the polished marble floor as she led Lily toward the elevators. Lily stared in awe at the high ceilings and large abstract paintings adorning the walls, her wonder bringing a small smile to Sarah's face despite her anxiety. "Mommy, it's like a castle," Lily whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. Sarah chuckled softly. "Maybe a little, but this castle has lots of rules, so we have to be extra quiet, okay?" Lily nodded, her wide eyes filled with a mixture of awe and determination. The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt longer than usual as Sarah rehearsed her excuses in her head. If anyone noticed Lily, she'd say it was an emergency, she'd apologize profusely, and promise it would never happen again. But deep down, she prayed it wouldn't come to that. The doors opened with a soft chime, revealing the familiar sight of rows of cubicles bathed in the glow of fluorescent lights. Most of the desks were empty, their occupants having left hours ago, but a few lights remained on, and the faint sound of typing could be heard in the distance. Sarah led Lily to her cubicle, a small space tucked away in a corner, and set her up with a coloring book and crayons she'd hastily grabbed from home. "Here you go, sweetheart. You can draw pictures while Mommy works, okay?" she said, arranging the crayons in a neat row. Lily beamed up at her. "I'll draw you a surprise." Sarah kissed her cheek and smiled. "I can't wait to see it." As she settled into her chair and logged into her computer, the familiar rhythm of work began to calm her nerves. Spreadsheets filled the screen, each one demanding her attention. She worked quickly but meticulously, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Every now and then, she glanced at Lily, who was engrossed in her coloring, her little tongue poking out in concentration. Time passed in relative quiet, the soft hum of the office broken only by the occasional sound of Lily humming to herself. Sarah began to relax, the weight of her worries momentarily lifting as she focused on her tasks. But just as she started to think she might get through the night unnoticed, a deep voice startled her. "Ms. Johnson." Sarah's heart leapt into her throat as she turned to see Jack Harper, the CEO of Harper Enterprises, standing just outside her cubicle. Towering at 6 feet 2 inches with a sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes, Jack was an imposing figure. His tailored suit and air of quiet authority only added to his commanding presence. He was known for his no-nonsense approach and his ability to spot mistakes a mile away. But tonight, his gaze wasn't on her computer screen, it was on the small child sitting in the corner of her cubicle. "Mr. Harper." Sarah stammered, standing so quickly that her chair rolled back and bumped into the desk. "I didn't realize you were still here." Jack's eyes narrowed slightly, his expression unreadable. "I had some work to finish. I wasn't expecting to find additional personnel." Sarah flushed, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, sir. My babysitter canceled last minute, and I didn't have anyone else to watch my daughter. I promise she won't be any trouble." Jack's gaze shifted to Lily, who was staring up at him with wide, curious eyes. The girl clutched her stuffed bunny and smiled brightly. "Hi." Lily chirped. "I'm Lily. Are you Mommy's boss?" Jack's lips twitched almost imperceptibly, as if suppressing a smile. "Yes, I am." Lily nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. "Mommy works really hard. She's the best." Sarah's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "Lily, sweetie, let Mr. Harper get back to his work." But before she could guide Lily back to her spot, the girl ran up to Jack and wrapped her tiny arms around the man's leg, hugging him tightly. "Bye-bye, Daddy," Lily declared, her voice filled with innocent glee. The room fell silent. Jack froze, staring down at the child in shock, while Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced, trying to comprehend what had just happened. "Lily," she exclaimed, rushing forward to pull her away. "I am so sorry, Mr. Harper." "I don't know why she said that." "It's fine," Jack said, though his voice was tinged with an emotion Sarah couldn't quite place. He gently pried Lily's arms from his leg and straightened his suit. "Children have active imaginations." He gave Sarah one last look, his expression unreadable, before turning and walking away. The soft click of his shoes echoed down the corridor until he disappeared around the corner. Sarah sank into her chair, her face buried in her hands. "Lily, why did you say that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily looked up at her, her green eyes filled with confusion. "He looks like a daddy," she said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Sarah sighed, pulling her into a hug. "Sweetheart, you can't just say things like that, okay?" "I'm sorry, Mommy," Lily mumbled, her voice muffled against her shoulder. "It's okay," she said, kissing the top of her head. "Let's just finish up and go home." But even as she returned to her work, her thoughts kept drifting back to Jack Harper. The way he looked at Lily, part surprise, part something else, had stirred a question she couldn't ignore. Little did she know, she wasn't the only one preoccupied with the evening's events. That night, Jack sat in his penthouse, staring out at the city lights, his mind racing. The girl's words echoed in his ears, and a sense of unease settled in his chest. Finally, he reached for his phone. "I need you to look into someone for me," he said. "Her name is Sarah Johnson." Sarah woke early the next morning with a mix of exhaustion and lingering embarrassment from the previous night's events. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of her small apartment, casting a warm glow on the living room, which doubled as Lily's play area. She glanced at the tiny desk where her crayons and paper were scattered, remnants of her late-night coloring project. Lily, still in her pajamas, padded into the kitchen, clutching her ever-present stuffed bunny, her messy bedhead and bright eyes softening Sarah's mood. "Good morning, Mommy," she chirped. Sarah bent down to kiss her forehead. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" "Yeah. I dreamed we went to the zoo and saw a big tiger." Lily's enthusiasm was infectious, and Sarah smiled despite herself. "That sounds like a fun dream," she said, ruffling her hair. "Maybe we can go to the zoo someday soon." As she prepared breakfast, her thoughts wandered back to Jack Harper. The man had always seemed like a distant figure, someone whose presence was felt more than seen. With his strict policies and reputation for excellence, she'd never had a personal interaction with him until last night, and the encounter had left her rattled. Lily's innocent declaration, "Bye-bye, Daddy," replayed in her mind like a broken record. She cringed at the memory of Jack's expression, a mixture of shock and something else she couldn't quite place. "I need to be more careful," she murmured to herself, flipping a pancake onto a plate. Lily sat at the table, swinging her legs as she ate. "Mommy, can I come to your work again?" she asked between bites. Sarah's heart sank. "No, baby, that was a one-time thing. Mommy's work isn't a place for kids." "But it was fun, and your boss was nice. He didn't even get mad at me." Sarah froze for a moment, then forced a smile. "Mr. Harper has a lot of important things to do. He doesn't have time to play." Lily nodded thoughtfully, as if considering this. "Okay, but maybe he can come to the zoo with us someday." Sarah laughed, shaking her head. "I don't think Mr. Harper is the zoo type." Meanwhile, in his sleek penthouse overlooking the city, Jack Harper stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his coffee untouched on the table behind him. He hadn't slept much, and his mind was still preoccupied with the events of the previous night. The girl, Lily, had been unexpectedly charming with her bright smile and unfiltered honesty. But it wasn't just the child that lingered in Jack's thoughts, it was Sarah. She'd been flustered, clearly uncomfortable, yet there was an undeniable strength beneath her nerves. Her dedication was evident. Bringing her daughter to work was a risk, but it spoke to her commitment to her job and her role as a mother. Jack had already instructed Ed, his assistant, to pull Sarah Johnson's file. It was a routine move for him. He liked to know more about the people in his company, especially those who caught his attention. His phone buzzed on the table, interrupting his thoughts. It was a text from his assistant, "File sent. Let me know if you need anything else." Jack opened the email attachment and scanned Sarah's personnel record. She'd been with the company for just under a year, working in the administrative department. Her performance reviews were glowing, noting her efficiency and reliability. But it was the personal information that caught his attention: single mother, no listed emergency contacts, prior job history includes retail and part-time roles. A faint frown creased his brow. Life hadn't been easy for her, it seemed, yet she carried herself with quiet determination. Jack closed the file, but the questions remained. Why had the girl called him daddy? Was it simply a child's imagination, or was there something more? At Harper Enterprises, Sarah arrived early, hoping to avoid any awkward encounters. She settled into her desk and immersed herself in her work, determined to prove she could handle her responsibilities without distractions. But as the morning wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every time she passed by the executive wing, she felt a prickle of awareness, as if Jack's piercing gaze was following her. Her suspicions were confirmed when, just before lunch, her phone buzzed with an email notification. Subject: Meeting request from Jack Harper. Ms. Johnson, please meet me in my office at 1:30 p.m. I'd like to discuss a matter regarding your position. Sarah's heart sank. Was this it? Was she about to be reprimanded or, worse, fired? She swallowed hard and reminded herself to stay calm. At 1:25 p.m., Sarah stood outside Jack's office, smoothing her skirt and taking a deep breath. The sleek glass doors seemed more intimidating than usual, and the nameplate Jack Harper, CEO, gleamed in the overhead light. She knocked lightly, and his deep voice called out, "Come in." The office was as imposing as its occupant, spacious and meticulously organized, with modern furnishings and an expansive view of the city skyline. Jack sat behind a large desk, his attention shifting from his computer screen to her as she entered. "Ms. Johnson," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him, "please have a seat." Sarah obeyed, clasping her hands tightly in her lap. "Mr. Harper, I want to apologize again for," he held up a hand, cutting her off. "You don't need to apologize. That's not why I called you here." His tone was calm, but his words did little to ease her nerves. "I wanted to talk to you about last night," he continued, leaning back in his chair. "Your daughter, Lily, seems like a bright and charming girl." Sarah blinked, surprised by the unexpected compliment. "Thank you. She's my whole world." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "It's clear you're doing your best to provide for her. Bringing her to work was a risky decision, but under the circumstances, I understand why you did it." Sarah hesitated, unsure of where this conversation was going. "I appreciate your understanding, Mr. Harper. I promise it won't happen again." "I believe you," he said, "but I also believe in supporting my employees when they're facing challenges." She looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Jack leaned forward, his gaze steady. "I've arranged for an in-house child care program to be implemented for employees with young children. It won't be immediate, these things take time, but I wanted you to know it's in the works." Sarah stared at him, stunned. "You're doing this because of me?" "Not just because of you," he replied, "but your situation highlighted a gap in our support system. If we want to retain talented employees, we need to ensure they have the resources they need to succeed both at work and at home." Emotion welled up in Sarah's chest, and she struggled to find the right words. "Thank you, Mr. Harper. This means so much." Jack's expression softened, and for a brief moment, the stern CEO seemed almost approachable. "You're welcome, Ms. Johnson. And if there's ever anything else you need, don't hesitate to ask." As Sarah left his office, a sense of relief and gratitude washed over her. She hadn't been fired. In fact, she'd been heard and supported in a way she hadn't expected. But as she returned to her desk, she couldn't help but wonder about Jack's sudden interest in her life. Why had he gone out of his way to help her, and why did it feel like there was more to his actions than simple generosity? That evening, as Sarah and Lily shared dinner, she told her daughter about the new child care program. "Does that mean I get to see you at work again, Mommy?" Lily asked, her eyes lighting up. "Maybe someday," Sarah said with a smile. But as Lily chattered on about her day, Sarah's thoughts drifted back to Jack. There was something about him, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. And far above the city, in his penthouse, Jack stared out at the skyline, his thoughts consumed by the same woman and her daughter. Jack picked up his phone and dialed a number. "I need to meet with someone who can help answer a question," he said. "It's about Sarah Johnson." Jack Harper sat at the head of a polished conference table the next morning, surrounded by senior executives and department heads. The usual air of formality pervaded the room, but his focus was elsewhere. His mind drifted back to the previous evening's encounter with Sarah and Lily. He could still hear the girl's innocent voice calling him Daddy, a word that lingered with unexpected weight. "Mr. Harper," one of the executives ventured, breaking his train of thought. "Yes." Jack responded sharply, his tone returning to its usual clipped efficiency. "We were discussing the upcoming acquisitions," the executive explained, gesturing toward a presentation slide. Jack nodded, forcing himself to engage. But even as the meeting continued, the questions swirling in his mind refused to be silenced. Why had Lily's words unsettled him so deeply? Was it simply the innocence of a child's imagination, or was there more to it? And why did Sarah Johnson, a seemingly ordinary employee, occupy his thoughts so persistently? When the meeting finally concluded, Jack returned to his office, closing the door behind him. He picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Robert," he said when the line connected. "I need you to look into something for me, discreetly." Meanwhile, Sarah was settling into her routine at work, grateful for a quieter morning. Lily was back at daycare, and she felt a renewed sense of determination after her conversation with Jack. His decision to implement an in-house child care program was more than she'd expected, and it gave her hope that she could navigate her challenges without constant fear of failure. But the calm didn't last long. Around mid-morning, her phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at the screen and froze. "Unknown number. Hi Sarah, it's Lena from Lily's daycare. Can you call me? It's about Lily." Her heart lurched. She excused herself from her desk and stepped into the hallway, dialing the number with trembling fingers. "Lena, it's Sarah. Is everything okay?" Lena's voice was calm but tinged with concern. "Hi Sarah. Lily's fine, but something unusual happened today. She was talking to one of the other kids about her daddy. When we asked her about it, she mentioned someone named Mr. Harper." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Oh no. I'm so sorry. I'll talk to her." "There's no need to apologize," Lena interrupted. "We just wanted to make sure everything's all right. It's not unusual for kids to create imaginary stories, but we thought you'd want to know." Sarah thanked her and ended the call, leaning against the wall as she processed the news. She knew Lily's words were innocent, but the implications filled her with dread. What if people started asking questions she couldn't answer? By lunchtime, Jack's private investigator, Robert, had uncovered more details about Sarah's life. Single mother, Robert reported over the phone. No father listed on the birth certificate. She's been on her own since before her daughter was born. Jack leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. No father at all. None officially, but Robert hesitated. But what? Jack pressed. There's a chance the girl's father could be someone she doesn't want to talk about, or someone who doesn't know, Robert said carefully. It's not my place to speculate, but it might explain the absence. Jack ended the call with more questions than answers. He'd never pried into an employee's personal life before, but this situation was different. He couldn't ignore the strange pull he felt toward Sarah and Lily. That evening, as the office began to empty, Jack found himself walking the quieter corridors, drawn toward the administrative department. He wasn't sure what he intended to do, perhaps just check in with Sarah and ensure she was coping. When he reached her desk, she was engrossed in her work, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Ms. Johnson," he said, startling her. Sarah looked up, her face flushing with surprise. "Mr. Harper, I didn't hear you." "I wanted to check in," he said, his tone measured. "Are you managing all right after last night? I imagine things must feel a bit unsettled." Sarah hesitated, unsure how to interpret his concern. "I'm fine, thank you. Just trying to stay focused." Jack nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary. "If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to let me know." As he turned to leave, Sarah called after him. "Mr. Harper." He paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice tinged with both gratitude and confusion. "The child care program, checking in. It's more than I expected." "Why do you care?" Jack hesitated, caught off guard by the directness of her question. For a moment, he considered brushing it off with a vague response, but something in her eyes stopped him. "Because I believe in supporting people who work hard," he said finally. "And because your daughter's words made me realize I could be doing more." Sarah stared at him, her emotions warring between gratitude and suspicion. But before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her with more questions than answers. The following weekend, Sarah took Lily to the park, hoping to shake off the stress of the week. The sun was shining, and the sound of children's laughter filled the air. Lily ran ahead, her laughter blending with the others as she climbed the jungle gym and slid down the slide. Sarah watched her with a mixture of pride and longing. She wished she could give Lily a bigger home, more adventures, and maybe even the father figure she deserved. But life hadn't turned out that way. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the man approaching until he spoke. "Ms. Johnson." Sarah turned, her eyes widening in surprise. "Mr. Harper." Jack stood there, dressed casually in a crisp button-down shirt and dark jeans, a far cry from his usual suit and tie demeanor. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I was taking a walk," he said simply, though the coincidence felt too perfect. His gaze shifted to Lily, who was now running toward them, her face lighting up when she saw Jack. "Hi, Mr. Harper," Lily called, waving enthusiastically. Jack crouched down to the girl's level, his usually serious expression softening. "Hi, Lily. Are you having fun?" Lily nodded eagerly. "Yeah. I climbed all the way to the top of the jungle gym. Want to see?" Jack glanced at Sarah, silently asking for permission. She hesitated, then nodded, unsure of what else to do. As Lily led Jack toward the playground, Sarah followed, her heart pounding. She watched as Jack interacted with her daughter, his demeanor surprisingly natural and kind. "You're pretty good at this," she said when they returned to her side. Jack shrugged, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Kids are honest. It's refreshing." Sarah couldn't argue with that. As the afternoon wore on, the three of them fell into an easy rhythm. Jack helped Lily build a sandcastle, and Sarah found herself laughing more than she had in weeks. For a moment, it felt like they were a family, a thought that both warmed and terrified her. Later that evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, Sarah sat on the couch, replaying the day in her mind. She couldn't deny the connection she felt with Jack, but she knew it was dangerous to let herself hope for something more. At the same time, Jack sat in his penthouse, staring out at the city lights. The day had left him feeling something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose beyond his work. But the unanswered questions about Sarah and Lily still gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were more intertwined than they appeared. Jack Harper stood at the window of his penthouse late that night, staring at the glittering skyline. The city stretched out before him, alive and vibrant, yet he felt an unfamiliar weight pressing down on him. His life had always been carefully compartmentalized: work, success, and occasional charity to ease his conscience. But now, thoughts of Sarah and Lily refused to leave his mind. "Why does it matter?" he muttered to himself, his voice barely audible over the hum of the city. Yet deep down, he knew the answer. There was something about the way Lily had called him daddy with such innocence, something about Sarah's quiet resilience and the way she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders without complaint. It stirred something in him he couldn't ignore. The buzz of his phone broke his thoughts. Robert's name flashed on the screen. "Tell me you found something," Jack said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "I did," Robert replied, "and it's complicated." Jack's jaw tightened. "Go on." "I found some records that were hard to piece together. Sarah Johnson attended a university near here about 4 years ago, around the same time you gave a guest lecture at that school on entrepreneurship. She was there, she signed in to attend." Jack frowned. "A guest lecture? That's not unusual. I've done dozens of those." "There's more," Robert continued. 9 months after that lecture, Sarah left the university. There are no records of her completing her degree, but she gave birth shortly after. The timeline matches up, Jack. The weight of Robert's words settled on him like a heavy stone. "Are you saying I can't confirm anything definitively?" Robert said carefully, "but it's possible that Lily is your daughter." Jack sank into his chair, his mind racing. Memories of that lecture resurfaced: a crowded auditorium, students eager to soak in his advice. He vaguely remembered Sarah's face among them. She'd stayed after, asking thoughtful questions about balancing ambition and personal responsibility, but he couldn't recall anything beyond that. "Thank you, Robert," he said, his voice quieter now. "I'll take it from here." The next morning, Sarah arrived at work feeling restless. The weekend at the park with Jack had been surprisingly enjoyable, but it had also left her feeling vulnerable. She couldn't deny the connection that seemed to form between them, but she was terrified of what it might mean. As she settled into her desk, her phone buzzed with a calendar notification: "Meeting with Jack Harper, 10:30 a.m. Her heart sank. What now? She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She couldn't afford to let her nerves get the better of her. At exactly 10:30, she knocked on Jack's office door. His voice called out, "Come in," and she stepped inside, clutching a notebook to her chest like a shield. Jack was seated at his desk, but he rose to greet her, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Johnson, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing for her to sit. Sarah hesitated, then took the offered seat. "Is something wrong?" Mr. Harper. He studied her for a moment before speaking. No, nothing's wrong. But there's something important we need to discuss. The serious tone of his voice made her stomach churn. Jack leaned forward, his gaze steady. I've been doing some thinking about you, about Lily. Sarah stiffened. What about us? I know this might sound strange, but I need to ask, did we meet before you started working here? Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She'd spent years hoping this moment would never come, but now it was here, and there was no escaping it. Yes, she admitted quietly. We met once at a lecture you gave at my university. Jack's eyes narrowed slightly. And after that? Sarah's hands trembled in her lap. She paused, searching for the right words. We spent some time together after the lecture. It was brief, and I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Her words hung in the air, and Jack's expression shifted, a mixture of realization and regret crossing his face. Lily, he said, his voice softer now. Is she mine? Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, and she nodded. Yes. She's your daughter. Jack leaned back in his chair, the revelation hitting him like a tidal wave. He'd spent years focused on building his empire, never imagining he might have a child out there, a child he hadn't known about, a child who had innocently called him daddy. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice tinged with both hurt and confusion. Sarah wiped at her eyes, her voice trembling. Because I didn't think you'd care. You were so far out of my league, Jack. You were this brilliant, successful man, and I was just a student trying to figure out my life. When I found out I was pregnant, I didn't even know how to contact you. And when I saw your name on the list of executives here, I panicked. I didn't know what to do. Jack's jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly, trying to process everything. I understand why you felt that way, he said finally. But you should have told me. I deserve to know, and more importantly, Lily deserved to know. Sarah looked down, guilt washing over her. I know. I've been so scared of what this would mean for her, for us. Jack stood, walking to the window and staring out at the city. After a long silence, he turned back to her. What matters now is what we do next, he said. Lily is my daughter, and I want to be part of her life. But I also want to respect your wishes. How do you want to handle this? Sarah's heart ached at the sincerity in his voice. She'd spent so long fearing this moment, but now that it was here, she realized she didn't have to face it alone. I want what's best for Lily, she said. If you want to be part of her life, I won't stop you. But this is all so new. We'll need time to figure it out. Jack nodded, his expression resolute. We'll take it one step at a time. But I promise you this, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be there for Lily and for you, in whatever way you need. Over the next few weeks, Jack began to integrate himself into Lily's life. It started with small visits, taking her to the park, helping her with puzzles, and learning about her favorite toys and snacks. Lily, ever the bright and curious child, took to Jack quickly, her bond with the man growing stronger with each passing day. For Sarah, it was both heartwarming and bittersweet. She saw a side of Jack she hadn't expected, a man who was patient, kind, and genuinely invested in their daughter. But the growing connection between them didn't stop at Lily. Late-night conversations about their shared past turned into something deeper, a rekindling of the spark they'd once had. One evening, as they sat on the couch after putting Lily to bed, Jack turned to Sarah. "I never thought my life would look like this," he admitted, "but I'm glad it does." Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "Me too." He reached for her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "Sarah, I don't just want to be part of Lily's life. I want to be part of yours, too. I know I've made mistakes, but I want to make it right for both of you." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but this time, they were tears of relief and happiness. "We've come this far," she said softly. "Maybe it's time to see where this can go." Jack pulled her into his arms, holding her close as they both realized that the future, for the first time, felt full of promise. Jack picked up his phone, dialed Robert. "I need you to dig deeper," he said. "There's something about this family I'm missing, and I need to know what it is." In 2025, as we navigate a world that increasingly values work-life balance and inclusivity, the story of Sarah Johnson and Jack Harper offers poignant lessons on empathy, connection, and the power of transparency. This tale underscores the importance of communication and understanding in personal and professional relationships. In a time where workplace dynamics are shifting to accommodate diverse needs, Jack's decision to implement an in-house child care program reflects the growing recognition that supporting employees holistically leads to a more engaged and productive workforce. For employers, this emphasizes the need to foster an environment where employees feel valued and understood, leading to increased loyalty and morale. Furthermore, the story highlights the significance of courage and vulnerability. Sarah's journey illustrates the strength it takes to confront past decisions and open up to new possibilities. As individuals, embracing vulnerability can lead to deeper relationships and personal growth. In a rapidly changing world, where personal and professional lives intertwine more than ever, the story encourages us to prioritize authentic connections and support systems that uplift everyone. By learning from Sarah and Jack, we are reminded that understanding, compassion, and open communication can transform challenges into opportunities for growth and connection. Dear viewers, as we've journeyed through the touching story of Sarah Johnson and Jack Harper, we're reminded of the profound impact that empathy and open communication can have on our lives. Now, we invite you to step into the narrative and share your thoughts on how Sarah and Jack should navigate this new chapter. Should Sarah and Jack take the leap towards building a family together, or should they focus on co-parenting while exploring their individual paths? How can they continue to balance their personal and professional lives in a way that supports their daughter, Lily? Your insights and suggestions could guide them in their journey, offering fresh perspectives and potential paths they might not have considered. Moreover, if you feel inspired, share your own experiences or advice on handling unexpected life changes and building supportive relationships. Your comments could resonate with others facing similar situations, creating a community of shared wisdom and support. As for the story's ending, consider an open-ended approach where Sarah and Jack stand at a crossroads, ready to embrace whatever the future holds. This could encourage a dialogue about the possibilities and choices that lie ahead, leaving room for hope, growth, and new beginnings. Your voice matters. Join the conversation and help shape their story's next chapter.